Right, let's start. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Ramsat. Welcome to our webinar this morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rob May. I'm the Managing Director here at Ramsat, and it's a pleasure to be speaking with you this morning. The first part of the session, I'm going to share my thoughts on this subject, and then we'll open this up into more of a discussion and a question and answer session. I am recording the session. You will also be sent copies of the slides at the end for your reference. If you think of questions along the way, feel free to put them in the chat, and then we will address them when we get to the end of the slides. I suspect that when it comes to returning to the office, we're all at slightly different stages. You know, some businesses are already back in the office or partially back in the office. Some never changed their place of work, and some are still fully working from home, dressed only from the waist up, like this guy just behind me on the slide. Whatever stage you're at in your business, there is a universal truth, and that is that our business world has forever changed. Some have struggled, some like us have been really blessed, but the genie is out of the bottle when it comes to working life. And I say that if you imagine the business norm is a woolen sweater and it's been held at stretch for 18 months, it won't ever return to the same shape again. And that brings us to our new hybrid world. But what is hybrid? What it isn't is simply doing meetings on Microsoft Teams or Zoom. Everyone did that 18 months ago, and by and large it worked. In fact, if you look at the stats, the change has been truly remarkable. This chart shows that the use of Microsoft Teams, this is mapping the use of Microsoft Teams across the Office 365 platform. On March the 12th, 2020, there were 560 million minutes used each day in Teams. 560 million minutes each day in Teams on Office 365. 4 days later, when lockdown happened, that increased to 900 million minutes. By March of this year, that had increased to 2.7 billion minutes every day. And now it's at 5 billion minutes every single day on Microsoft Teams. So truly astonishing shift. And when you look at the money that business have saved by reducing expenses and travel costs, and just how used to video calling people are, we have to accept that this is one of our new norms. Some people worried that it would decrease customer intimacy, but actually the reverse has happened. It's far easier to have more frequent yet shorter virtual face-to-face meetings, and geography is no longer an inhibitor. Some of you may remember in the distant past, when VHS came out, the film industry were worried that it would destroy cinema. And actually, the exact opposite happened. As more people had increased access to film, so they wanted more, and it triggered a massive boost in cinema spend. And we've seen that same equivalent here. So what is hybrid? The reality of hybrids is that we now need to have a blend of people in the room and people at home or in their own remote office locations. You need to be able to see them and they need to be able to see you. And I think one of the key challenges, and this is one of the things that we have to think of, is that it needs to be an equal experience. Whether you're in the office or whether you're remote, it needs to be an equal experience. I was with a client recently and one of their remote staff members said that they couldn't see something and their CEO snapped, well, you should be here then, shouldn't you? And that's totally the wrong attitude. And it's totally old school. This isn't just about technology either. What you've got to think of, traditionally, we spent thousands of pounds on our reception space in our offices, you know, really important to make the right first impression. At Ramsat, we signed £1.5 million worth of new contracts with clients whom we'd never met in person during the COVID period. So their first impressions of us and who we are based purely on a digital meeting and what the experience is when you're online. And we have to be cognizant of that. And your meetings need to be slick too. Otherwise, it reflects badly on that first impression. According to Microsoft's figures, it takes an average of 12 to 14 minutes for most businesses to get their meetings underway. Some of that is people being late, sure, but some of it is them not having sound or struggling with the technology and so on. And when you're fully back in the office, meeting rooms and huddled spaces will be a premium. You know, the way we're using office spaces has changed. And I think what you've got to be able to do is facilitate the ability that people can book themselves a space to do a Teams meeting and book it for a set time period. And then be good to go and go in, do their meeting and leave on time so that the next person has access to that meeting space. So we have to think about, how does it work? How does the tech work? And I also want to make a couple of observations based on recent experiences. The first is your IT person doesn't necessarily experience client meetings or board meetings in the way that you do. And the solutions that some IT people suggest or request quotes for is often based on their own meeting experiences and not yours. So make sure that they understand or are taking advice from people who do. Second is what's easy and logical for IT people isn't necessarily the case for everyone else. You need to think of your most Luddite user in your business, and the meeting room just needs to work for them, and it needs to work quickly, and it needs to work efficiently. Thought also needs to be given to the impact of using tech in meetings. What you can see here up in the top left, this shows brain activity. The two charts, the blue and the red shows brain activity. Now the red is showing increased mental effort on brain activity when looking at either a Zoom call or Teams call in that sort of traditional celebrity squares format. The blue chart shows far less mental effort when you're looking at the together view, which you can see on the right of the screen. And this uses Microsoft's AI to create the illusion of being together in the room. Your eye is only having to look in one place, and that's replicating what happens when you're sat in a traditional meeting room facing a group of people. You're just looking in one place. You're not having to look in all of these squares. And bottom left is just a reminder that, of course, you can choose to blur your background or use a branded corporate wallpaper dependent on where you're working from, and of course the state of your room. Before lockdown, at Ramsat, we upgraded the TV in our boardroom to a much bigger TV screen, and we were sharing and collaborating far more digital content in our meetings, and therefore we decided that was a necessity. In our hybrid world, where we sort of took 8 chairs out of our boardroom for distancing purposes, we found that you started a meeting where we've got some people in the room and some people remote, and you started the room and you could see all the remote attendees on the screen. But as soon as you start to share content or share the whole screen, you lose those people. If you move to 2 screens in your meeting room, you can have remote users on one and content on the other. And remember, what we're striving for is an equal experience. And you want the people in the room to see the remote people. You know, it's not just about, well, what can they see? You need to be able to see, and you need to be able to see people's responses and so on. And look, 2 TV screens isn't an expensive option. There's a lot of tech out there, and I think that some people will try and sell you interactive screens or Surface Hub technology and so on. And sure, a second display being touchscreen is really nice and it's slick, but there are other cheaper ways. Many businesses already have sort of old school whiteboards or writable walls. If you simply add a whiteboard camera, which is not an expensive piece of kit, then Teams gives you now an option called intelligent content capture. And what you can see here behind me is someone writing on a whiteboard and Teams intelligently opaquing out the person so that the remote attendees can see what he's writing. I think this is brilliant. And this is sort of a, you know, a £90 camera that's doing this. So really very clever. In a talk like this, I always avoid talking about product. My view is I'm here to provoke thought rather than promote products and services. However, I thought it was worth highlighting that some of the solutions that have come to market are really cheap and yet desirable too. What you can see here on the screen, this is the Lenovo ThinkSmart View, and this gives you a very easy collaboration tool by simply having a device that's not much bigger than an Amazon sort of Echo Show, that you can control either via a laptop or via a mobile phone. And it gives you, it's been designed purely for Teams. So you could have a member of your board, for example, who doesn't want a home office, doesn't want a lot of tech, but they need to be able to access meetings. With this little box that just sits on a shelf, they can access Teams. It's got inbuilt video, inbuilt sounds. They can quickly review documents. It also works well for people who have only got a laptop at home and don't have space for an external screen. because I can have this, it doesn't take up any space, run Teams on this, and then continue to use their laptop for note taking and so on. And this is less than £250. Really nice piece of kit. So I'm not talking about tech, but I just wanted to say it's not all expensive, but the world has definitely evolved. And look, there's lots of technology that I can talk to you about, but I will do that outside of the meeting. This talk isn't about the tech, but if you want to talk about it, or if you want help or advice, then please don't hesitate to let us know. But as I've already said, our thoughts need to be far more or more than just technology. Consider meeting dynamics too. In the old business world, if you walked into a boardroom, it would typically be apparent what the hierarchy was. You probably had an exchange of business cards, etc. When you're meeting in a hybrid world, things aren't always that clear. So think about what you can do to establish who people are, who's in the room, what are their roles, and who else might be listening that you can't see. I've heard of a number of examples recently of people where actually they didn't know certain stakeholders were listening in on the call because they happened to be in the room, but they weren't on camera. And we just need to think about that. On average, most people have 10 meetings a week. I sometimes have that in a day, but the average is that most people have 10 meetings a week. And meetings often are not efficient because they're longer than planned. Attendees are multitasking, they're unprepared, maybe they're late. It's hard to schedule everyone, or there are too many meetings. People also forget the human element. Remote participants feel isolated, exasperated by technical difficulty in terms of connecting, or they might struggle with presenting and sharing content and so on. And we need to ensure that we think about this and that we invest in appropriate technology to enable us to have more modern meetings that strive for that equal experience. And businesses that do that will have higher overall productivity and therefore increase competitiveness. I hope that this has been a useful session, and I thank you very much for joining us. Have a great day.